If you're a fan of old school FPS like Doom, immersive sims like System Shock, then it's been a pretty good week for you. 3D Realms had their big streaming event recently, Realms Deep, and it included updates on the System Shock remake. So let's take a look at everything that was announced and talked about in one video. Hi, Estelden here. Modern gaming is certainly in an odd place when games that look like they were made in the 90s are some of the ones that I'm most excited for. 3D Realms recently had their Realms Deep stream, and it's such a breath of fresh air to see games that are just fun video games. There's no live service crap, microtransactions, just fun games regardless of the graphical quality. I find that indie development can be very hard to follow sometimes, given that none of the big publications ever want to really cover them, because the games simply aren't mainstream enough, and the companies behind the games just don't have the marketing budgets to spend on all that advertising. Often I'll hear about an indie game that's just been released or is about to come out and I'll be shocked that I'd never heard of it before. I would love to see this change, seeing that often these games are far more interesting, offer far better content and creativity than most of the AAA nonsense we get at the best of times. If we look at the big hyped game of the week, it's the newly released Marvel's Avengers, and I honestly think just about everything announced at Realms Deep was far more interesting. Starting off the event, there was of course Graven. Now, I've already done a standalone video on the game, so if you want to check that out too, it should hopefully give you some insight into what that looks like, and it really is a fantastic looking game. While you're at it, if you enjoy the style of games I talk about and want the game industry to get back to having more integrity too, please consider subscribing to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. The short version though is Graven is a first-person action puzzler. There's some immersive sim elements in there, so probably a bit of Deus Ex, a bit of Ultima Underworld, given it's a bit of a sword and sorcery styled game, and it is looking really good, so I encourage anyone to check it all out. Next up though is Ultrakill. It's published by New Blood Interactive, who had several games feature at this event, and you might know them from a medieval, a Hexen and Heretic-like game that released not too long ago. Ultrakill is actually out on Steam Early Access, and to sum it up, it's like a bit of a cross between Doom Eternal and Devil May Cry, while still packing those old school graphics. It is a pretty interesting take on the Doom formula, although the arena style of level design I could imagine might put off a few diehards who did feel that the arenas held Eternal back from being a truly modern Doom experience, so that's something you will want to keep in mind. The new trailer release did show off a reasonable amount of different levels, there's a lot of variety there, and it appears to have a lot of speedrunning potential if that's something you're into. There's also a free demo out on Steam, so you can check it all out, see if it's your cup of tea, and there was actually a 10 out of 10 user score on Steam the last time I looked, so it is all looking pretty promising. Gloomwood is next on the list, and this is another one from New Blood Interactive. We've known about this one since earlier in the year, but now we've seen a bit more of the gameplay in action, which gives us a better idea of what to expect from the finished product. New Blood and the devs had previously described the game as Thief with guns, and some of the textures and graphic styles certainly give that vibe. But does the game deliver on all fronts, including the gameplay? One thing I will say is when you're developing a retro-looking title like this, you do need to keep in mind that the modding scene is very real competition. There are a ton of incredible Thief levels, Doom levels as well to give an example, so if you are making a commercial title that looks very similar to those games, you'll want it to at least match or be even better quality than all of those mods out there, because I mean, those mods are free, and you're asking people to pay for this game. In Gloomwood's case, the art style has gotten a lot of Thief fans interested, but there are some very definite changes which make it very clear this is not just a Thief style game. There's a Resident Evil 4 style inventory system, the save system is very survival horror as well, and the devs have even said it takes a fair bit of influence from straight up immersive sims like System Shock 2 and Deus Ex. Gloomwood's showing was more about previewing the inventory system, and it is very cool the way you slap down the briefcase and you open it right up. It is a very immersive way of doing this in a video game, rather than just pressing I and then you get into a menu screen. It keeps it all within the game world. But given they were really just showing off an inventory system, it does tell me that this game is still a little ways off. Like with Ultrakill though, there's a free demo available to play on Steam. I've had a look and it is obvious there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but given its influences, the style, it looks really cool, it's certainly one to keep an eye on. Now, enter Brutal Fate. This one is a much easier game to describe, and you can expect it to be just like old school Doom. It's developed by the creator of Brutal Doom, which to those of you who are not familiar with the modding scene, it's a very popular gameplay mod that's been supported since 2010. This obviously comes from someone with a very deep attachment to the series, and you can expect Brutal Fate to deliver something that's truly respectful of what the series has been about. The levels and art direction do look fantastic, there looks to be plenty of great gunplay, and I'm pretty much sold on this one. The creator has plenty of credibility too with his original campaign work on Brutal Doom, so this is one certainly on the wish list. Jumping ahead to one that is a little bit more well known, it's higher profile, we got another look at Night Dive's System Shock Remake. This project's been a real mess, and yet another really bad story in the sorry line of Kickstarter endeavours out there. This remake was meant to be released like 3 years ago, but the project's changed directions a lot along the way. As far as I can gather, it started out as a faithful remake, and then they decided they wanted to do a more accessible reimagining so more modern gamers could get into it, which to me was a real red flag and a slap in the face. If you want to make an accessible System Shock, then you go ahead, but don't mislead people on Kickstarter who are expecting the old school treatment. Understandably, there was some backlash, but Night Dive persisted on, until they essentially came crawling back when they ran out of money, and they realised their project was just too ambitious for what they were trying to do. From this point, they reverted back to just a remake of the original, but due to their change in game engines, they basically had to start from scratch all over again. It really sounds like a lot of work from what really should have just been a simple remake from the start, and when it finally does release, I'd be skeptical if it really justifies or lives up to the hype of a dev cycle that was this long. What Night Dive showed off specifically though included the cyberspace sections of the game. It was all looking really cool, it was quite detailed, I was really liking the music, and I am hopeful that the end product will at least be a reasonably faithful remake and some positive news for once in the System Shock universe. To add to that, I've mentioned it before, but Tencent are making System Shock 3. So make of that what you will, but when the scummiest games company in China is at the helm of a beloved franchise, it does feel like dark days. On to more positive things though, we had Hellhunt next. Yet another retro FPS, or boomer shooter as I saw someone call them. I do like that one. So the interesting thing with this game is rather than simply taking Doom influence, it very much looks more along the lines of the original Quake. I'm a massive fan of the tone of that game, and I felt it was a real missed opportunity not to keep that going in Quake 2, which really just changed things up far too much in both the gameplay and art department. I have a feeling this one is probably a little while away, but there is a playable demo available. It gives you a good feel of the features such as bullet time, where you'll slow everything down after you kill an enemy. There's also a dash button, and the devs did comment that they'll be putting in a lot of work to improve those features. Right now they do feel a little awkward, and despite the devs absolutely nailing the tone of the game, we'll have to see how all that develops and if it all works out. Now for Postal Brain Damage. This one had a comedy segment introduction, which was not something I was expecting. Props to Running with Scissors, the publisher I believe, for doing something interesting for that one. This is a bit of an intriguing one, as it very much looks like an FPS in a similar vein to a lot of the other shooters we've seen already in the show, which is a little different to the traditional Postal series. This has been marketed as a spin-off to that series, and I'm surprised we're getting this one while Postal 4 remains in early access, seemingly taking a long time to finish. Others out there with a bit more knowledge on the series, I'm sure will kind of know more, but I do wonder if maybe they were a little too ambitious with the visual side of Postal 4 and the design, and perhaps a game like this is being used to help fund it? I'm not really sure, but we'll certainly have to see what happens, and the game does look fun, and I'm keen to see a bit more of it. The selling point of the game is that it won't just have plot twists along the way, but it will also have plot holes. So there's plenty to intrigue us when it comes to Postal Brain Damaged. And now for something completely different, because forget the blood, the explosions, that all makes way for platforming and Tron-like visuals with Cyberhook. We only got a snippet of this one, but it does look fairly interesting. There is a playable teaser on Steam, and it's far more focused on 3D platforming, which is a bit of a far cry from the other games in this video. There is a bit more to it though. You do have the grappling hook that you can use to help you through the 70 plus levels of parkour action that it supposedly has. You can also warp time, which is there to help you out when you make a fuck up. So like when you fall off a ledge or something and you're trying to look around for something to grapple onto, it's going to give you a bit more time to assess things. This one looks pretty cool, but I do think it might slip through the cracks at an event like this where it's mostly FPS fans and it might not cross over to what is a fairly different genre, to be honest. The 80s vibes and the presentation, they do give it a lot of unique personality though, so we'll see how it all shapes up. Whew, we're getting through all these. There is a fair bit here, but I'll at least say that it's going to keep us covered for FPS games over the next little while, I would say. And obviously for some of them we've just seen snippets, so we don't know if they're going to be really good or if they might miss the mark or something. I really don't know. But what I will say is probably Gloomwood is the one that's the most eye-catching if it comes to what's been memorable, although I do feel the level design in Brutal Fate will probably be fantastic, so we'll really just have to see how it all develops. Doombringer is next up, and you can probably take a guess at what influenced that one. More than that though, this was actually created by modders in the Doom and Quake scene, so you can expect a pretty safe, predictable affair, I would say. I'm sure there'll be plenty of great stuff here though, and the good news is episode 1 will be free, so it is worth like a follow on Steam if more Doom and Quake intrigues you. There's also plans for a free multiplayer component, so fans of Quake 3 might be able to get their fix with this one. It does actually look to have more in common, I'd say overall, with that title than the original Quake. One that really got my attention though was Effigy. This is not just a straight up FPS, but it's actually a bit of a Metroidvania. And the premise is quite simple. Survive the Black Moon, find your way home, kill their god. The dev behind this one previously developed a narrative adventure game called Sagebrush, and though I haven't played that one, it looks to have been well received, so I imagine there'll be a fair few story elements in this title, especially since there are quest givers, and clearly this will be a very different style of affair compared to your average Doom clone. Metroidvania and Souls-like games are very much up my alley, so this one has been wishlisted, and I will check out early access whenever that comes out next year. Aside from all this, there were some interesting looking mods and expansions that were announced that look pretty cool, like the Iron Maiden one. There was another really awesome game they showed off though, and this one was not just an FPS, it looks like a genuine immersive sim. It looks really awesome, and that game is called Decay. The tone of the game reminded me a lot of Deus Ex, with some environments that really did bring me back to System Shock 2. It's really nice to get some variety outside the typical FPS stuff, so this one, it really grabbed my attention. It's set in 2089, nations are governed by corporations, and the planet is on the brink of collapse. And it appears you've joined a group of conspirators hell-bent on one last-ditch effort to save the planet. According to the Steam page, there will be 11 locations to explore in true immersive sim fashion, and you'll do all of that good stuff like hack computers, different routes you can take, key codes, passwords, and a variety of different tools. From feedback I've seen so far, I'd say the main concern might be too much gunplay, so hopefully there is a good balance there, and we can finally get something that at least takes us back to the Deus Ex glory days, given the immersive sim genre has been in a pretty sad state recently. And I am pretty hopeful from what we've seen so far. Overall, I'm pretty excited, and it's events like this that really bring me back to what gaming was all about. Just a good game, plenty of fun, none of the bullshit monetization that's plagued modern gaming. And I can only hope that the games from this event that turn out to be really good are supported by the wider community and maybe introduce some new people into these genres like FPS and immersive sims. I would have loved to talk about some other stuff, like there's some remasters and everything coming too, but I think these are like the heavy hitters that we really want to be on the lookout for. And hopefully there's more to come. Hopefully there's other FPS, immersive sims, whatever else that take influence from an event like this and see that there's still an audience for these great games. So let's see what happens. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.